Hi, everybody. Welcome to our next session here. It's great to have everybody with us. Here they come in. I'm Matt Savas from the Lean Enterprise Institute, and I'm going to introduce one of our many panel members for this session on A3. I'll introduce Lex Schroeder. Lex is the Senior Manager of Technology Transformation Enablement at Ryder System. She also founded the Lean Post at the Lean Enterprise Institute. So if you ever get free content from us on lean.org, that's all thanks to Lex. She's also written for the Harvard Business School's Race, Gender, and Equity Initiative, and she previously worked at Twitter, working on the public safety team. So with that, I'll hand it over to Lex.
Hi, welcome. I'm going to I'm going to facilitate this brief but fabulous panel tonight and introduce my panelists soon, but I want to tell you a little bit about why I wanted to have this conversation. Um, I've been reflecting a lot on kind of what has been most useful to me when I think about lean thinking in practice. And it's really been among many technical problem solving tools and processes. It's been the social side of things, the relational side of things, the A3 thinking process and dialogue that it sort of makes happen. And I've been extraordinarily lucky to have great coaches at the Lean Enterprise Institute and elsewhere who have developed the A3 thinking process in me and helped me coach others. As I've thought about work and how teams connect the last few years, I've thought a lot about how A3 thinking, when it's used really skillfully with care, can create a more inclusive work environment. So that's why if you saw the title of this panel, or if you were in the workshop earlier this afternoon, I'm not saying A3 thinking will create, no tool or process can create an inclusive work environment, but it can aid in more respectful work cultures where people really invite each other's thinking, respect and honor each other's thoughts and experience and hard work. And that collective sense making can happen, which is sort of the goosebump moment that I love to feel at work when you think together and you're smarter because of your colleagues. So I just want to introduce my panelists briefly, and then we'll get right into it and take your questions as well. I promise we're going to be speedy, but not too fast. Dr. Nadia Butt, if you could kind of give a wave, brings 20 years experience across financial services, healthcare technology, and she created lean management systems at Liberty Mutual and CVS Health. Her research interests lie at the intersection of organizational behavior, continuous improvement, diversity and talent management, and workplace identity. She's been quoted in Forbes, and she recently co-authored a chapter in the Handbook on Workplace Diversity and Stratification. She's founder of NAS Consulting, where she specializes in leadership development and learning effectiveness, organizational learning and effectiveness, DEI, and talent management. She holds an ED from George Washington University, MBA from Sawyer Business School, and serves on the board of directors of Muslim Women Professionals. And she's co-host of the Inclusive Collective podcast. Eliza A. Fendel, if you could give a little wave, is a change and culture thought leader. She's director of change enablement at Ryder System, Inc. You may see the trucks going around doing fabulous things. She's used A3 thinking, among other change management tools and processes, to lead enterprise-wide change initiatives within IT during a time of high transformation at Ryder. She's led organizational transformation, leadership development, and culture initiatives for the largest e-commerce cross-border provider for Latin America and the Caribbean. And she holds a JD from George Mason. Margie Hagney. Margie's an organizational effectiveness and lean thinking continuous improvement teacher and coach. She has 30 years experience helping executives recognize their changing roles in complex systems. She supports leaders in creating organizations filled with competent, confident problem solvers. I love that. For 18 years, she worked as a global internal consultant for Ford Motor Company at all levels and coached team leaders all the way up to the COO. She's worked in manufacturing, healthcare, education, transportation, and more. She focuses on both the social and technical components in complex systems, and she does a lot of community work on hunger relief and land conservation. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Education from Butler University and a Master of Science in Education from Indiana University. And lastly, William Huen, who is Associate Chief Medical Officer and Clinical Professor who is passionate about improving health and delivering high-quality care with compassion and respect. He's experienced in leading and coaching and teaching quality improvement, health equity improvement, strategy deployment, lean transformation, A3 thinking, and care for vulnerable populations. His educational background is in health policy and management, and he's board certified in internal medicine. So I just want to welcome everybody. We've got a really strong group of brilliant thinkers, and I want to have a kind of wonderful conversation about the intersection of lean thinking and practice and more inclusive work environments. So to start, this is kind of a quick topic since we don't have a ton of time. I'd love to hear from each of you what inclusive strategy development means to each of you and why this topic is important to you. So I'm gonna pass the ball to one of you and invite you to pass the ball to someone else. So William, can you start? Why did you agree to be on this panel? What does this mean to you, inclusive strategy development?
Short answer is Margie told me to. The longer answer is, so I work at a public academic safety net hospital. We're super mission driven, but I'm sure unlike any of you all, we're really complex, we're really diverse, but we're also very siloed, reactive to a lot of the dynamic and external conditions, naming, pandemic disparities, things like workplace violence and burnout. We just heard from the last talk. And so how do we go from that's current condition to an organization of 10,000 aligned problem solvers that is mission-driven, data-driven, that's human-centered. And to me, inclusive strategy development is a key piece of that.
Thank you. You can pass the ball.
I'm going to pass to Margie, since she's the reason I'm here.
In my formal background in education, I was taught, I had it drilled into me that my job is to create the conditions for thinking and learning. And how I connect that to the practice of continuous improvement and lean thinking is the framework of A3 thinking. I think I've learned that people do better work together, better thinking together when there are simple structures that support their practice. The framework for A3 thinking is both simple and rigorous and thorough and multi-layered. And my observation is that it helps people do much less swirling. It helps people to better focus. The paper tells the story, and it has the opportunity to pull in as many voices and as many perspectives as the condition requires. So I've just found it to be an incredibly powerful framework for socio-technical work.
Thank you. And who will you pass to?
Eliza.
Thanks, Margie. So coming from a change lens background, organizational change, we are used to identifying the gaps. We're used to identifying what is not being said, what is something that needs to be explored. And so when Lex introduced me to A3 thinking, it really brought in a mechanism for us to document and have the conversations that we've been trying to have, but we're really challenged with. We're used to multiple stakeholders, we're used to multiple conversations, but to William's point about it being siloed, right? Like how do you make it so that it's all connected? And I think for the change lens, what we really want to bring to the table is make sure that all of our stakeholders feel represented and that their voice is contributing to what we're saying. And so for that inclusivity piece, the A3 has really been a really game changer for us. Nadia, to you.
Eliza, thank you. Actually, as you were speaking, I was like, yes, yes, yes. So I think similarly to me, inclusive strategy development really means integrating diverse perspectives and thought at every stage of the problem solving process. And that includes ensuring that all voices, particularly those who have been historically marginalized in organizations, are heard, are respected, are valued. And I see like this value in building strategies that not only, are effective, but also equitable and sustainable, where everyone's voices and experiences are reflected in the solutions and outcomes of that thought process.
I'd like to stay with you for a moment, Nadia. I know that you have this kind of rigorous lean thinking and practice background, and then you also do a lot of work around DEIB. And I would love to hear a little bit more. I mean, you just spoke to it a little bit, but of how you merge those two worlds, because to the layperson, it might seem like two very different worlds, but I'd love to hear how you do that when you work with organizations.
Yeah, thanks for the thoughtful question. So, bringing together the concepts of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, right? So DEIB, lean thinking, systems thinking, it's for me, it's been an incredibly rewarding part of my work. At the core, both DEIB and Lean focus on creating and fostering environments where people can thrive, whether that's by removing barriers that have historically been there for, to inclusion, or eliminating any sort of inefficiencies that may hinder progress. So to me, these, merging these roles starts with recognizing that organizations are complex. They're complex systems. They're made up of diverse and sometimes complex individuals with unique needs and experiences. So lean and systems thinking can provide the tools, and Margie had mentioned like a framework, right, to really map out these complexities, helping to seek almost like these interdependencies that can help us identify root causes of inequities or inefficiencies, and then create a more holistic, equitable, sustainable solution. That's kind of the short end of it.
That was great. I don't know how you did that so succinctly. Thank you, thank you. And Will, I remember seeing you speak at the Lean Summit in Tucson a couple of years ago about the work that you're doing at Zuckerberg General Hospital and Trauma Center. And what I was struck by was not just how you leveraged A3 thinking as an organization, but used it to build stronger teams. And I would love to hear if you can summarize or speak to kind of how you're doing that these days at the organizational level to the extent that you can share.
Yeah, it's at multiple levels. I think that we've decided that A3 thinking is part of our culture. We aspire to on our best days. I've told you we have a history of reactivity and instant command structures and command and control, but we also are trying to leverage A3 thinking as a discipline, less as a tool, and as a embedded within that is the idea of catchball. And the first question we teach is not only what's the problem, why now, but who are the stakeholders, and who not only owns it, but who has historically not been given voice, or who has not seen this as an interest of theirs, but actually we can expand through catchball. I think that's an example of that. We've done A3 thinking now at our strategic level. So on Monday, we had 2 different levels of executives doing Hoshin planning, Hoshin Connery strategic deployment using A3 thinking. Tuesday, we were teaching our several classes on using A3 thinking, asking why. And then on my Wednesday, I was thinking about this. We were in a committee, and that could just be a committee with a lot of documents and tools, but we were using A3 thinking, right? So we had departments of psychiatry, patient finance, our trauma surgeons, each reporting their problem solving that they're seeing from the bottom up as well as top down, using A3s and A3 structures. And so that to me is how an organization can engage using this shared language and discipline. And so you have neurosurgeons and you have the head of finance using a shared language. To me, that is a important critical piece of being a more diverse, representative and inclusive organization.
Thank you so much. Eliza, I'd love to move to you now. I know that you come from what some folks, in the Lean community might consider a more traditional change management background. And I have had the privilege of working with you and seeing how skillfully you translate A3 thinking for newbies. And I know you've also had the chance to work across cultures, and, across the Caribbean and different parts of the United States and different demographics as well, and cultures within the United States. And I'm just curious, particularly working with folks who are new to A3 thinking, what have you found to be successful teaching and coaching A3 thinking, and what have you found to be not so successful?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I still consider myself a newbie to this space, so I think I view it through that lens, right? I think that it's actually a very helpful lens for me to adopt, because for me, it's about connecting it to what people are already grounded in, right? So I know at Ryder, within the Office of the CIO, we've been having a lot of conversations around more agile frameworks, Scrum, Kanban, et cetera. But obviously, lean thinking completely informs that, right? So if you connect it to something that somebody's already grounded in, it's a much easier reach for them to get to than trying to introduce something that is completely new. I mean, again, from the change lens, new is scary, new is unknown. We don't like new. So if you start with, this is just, and you use the term rigor before, maybe Margie used the term rigor before, and I'm a big believer in this concept of rigor instead of rigidity, right? Like when you want to move towards rigor, it's just about adding, hey, we can just tighten this a little bit. Have you considered this? And that is just, it's a very small step instead of, oh my gosh, I have to take on something completely new. I'm not ready for that. It's too much.
Thank you so much. And Margie, I mentioned this when we all got ready for this panel, right? This is sort of a full circle moment for me because you were one of my first teachers in my early to mid 20s when I was learning all about lean management systems. And I, at first I was like, what is this? Oh my God. And then, oh my God, I love it. And then what's happening to my brain? So I just want to thank you for being here, first of all. And then I'd love to hear your perspective on sort of how A3 thinking can help teams simultaneously be more effective and more inclusive. I think sometimes there's this narrative that if you want to be an inclusive organization, you don't care at all about effectiveness or something. And if you want to be an effective, super rigorous organizations, well, then DEIB is over here. And so I'd love to hear, with your deep experience and, as a coach, a lean coach on the management system side, how you see sort of the effectiveness and inclusive piece going hand in hand. And why does it matter? Small question. And why does it matter?
Other than that, it's my sense that in order to be effective, it's hard to be effective if it doesn't involve learning. So if I go back to my foundation of creating the conditions for thinking and learning, I had my aha when I had John Shook as my coach in my last 5 years at Ford, that what Toyota seemed to be especially good at was creating the conditions for thinking and learning and having a plan for every person, at least intention towards having a plan for every person for how to go about that. And one of the fundamental skills was the practice and continually improving upon your practice of A3 thinking. So when I think about that, that's just a very darn respectful way to think about employees, about people who come to work every day to do the best work that they can do. And so for me, it all comes up under the header of respect, and linking that with some of the components of A3 thinking when we're doing evidence gathering about current state. It is respectful to go to talk to the people and do evidence gathering about those who are closest to the work. When we're practicing catchball, Will made mention of catchball, asking open-ended questions to hear how others think about it is respectful. Me actively listening when people are speaking is respectful. Creating the opportunities for people to learn this framework and have supported practice is respectful. Will made mention of the workshops that are going on at Zuckerberg San Francisco General this week. And so it's an opportunity, it is a framework and a practice to hear and involve all voices, all brains, all roles, and meet people where they're at and support them with getting a little bit better every day. And I would like to work at a place like that.
I love that.
So the so what of it, the why does it matter? Because that would be a lovely place to work, and the output of that work would seem to be more likely to be a satisfier for the people who are the recipients of our efforts.
Thank you so much. I have another question if needed, but I want to open it up. So Matt, can we look at the chat? Are there any questions in the chat? We'd love to take your questions from the audience.
We don't have any questions coming in yet, Lex. But
Okay, I've got plenty.
again, for everybody using the Q&A, just pop in your questions in that Q&A, and we'll see them as they
Tell me
come
when
in.
you do. So my question, go
Lex,
ahead.
I'm sorry. I think we do have one question. It's just that, me, I just went ahead of myself and answered it. So if you look over in the little
Oh,
answered
okay.
section.
Oh, sorry about
that.
that. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. Okay, let's see here. I'm a lean manager for a national company. I face opposition to change But I also face teams who are too afraid to speak or too shy to express their frustration with waste in the business. What might be some things I can say or structures I can use as tools to enable them to find their voices rather than lean trainings being met by the stuffed animals reaction? Not sure what that is, but good question. I think something a lot of people struggle with.
Whoever would like to answer.
I may just jump in really quickly. I mean, of course, there's several different kind of change management techniques, but I think one avenue that I've been really focused on as of late is leveraging focus groups or one-on-one interviews to understand the sentiments and perceptions of a process, or understand sentiments or perceptions of culture. Oftentimes, kind of the inefficiencies in a process. Usually, there's some sort of systemic cultural or people practice that comes through as well. And so I leveraging sort of those qualitative measures, perhaps even a survey if you feel that you need to get more of a voice, but oftentimes you're able to capture something in terms of sentiment. It's not the only approach. I think the colleagues on this call will offer several more, but that's one approach that I've been really kind of tuning into as of late.
Other thoughts from folks?
I mean, for consideration that, in healthcare, historically deeply hierarchical, very knowledge driven. The smarter you are, the longer your white coat, and so that kind of authority and culture of safety has been something we've been working on and studying from a patient safety perspective, and how do you support people to speak up. And I think we are learning that there are many things that are part of it. So one is working with the leaders themselves, right, and making sure that I think the opportunity in A3 thinking is it makes even the smartest, most knowledgeable people feel a little vulnerable with a learner's mindset. And what I love, my favorite part is when they have that aha moment because they've learned from somebody else. The little dopamine kicks in and they're like, wait, this is exciting. Let me do that again. So getting that kind of addiction loop so that they're actually listening and wanting to ask the questions. And then, of course, I think in a lot of cultures where there's not a lot of listening and not a lot of asking, people at other levels will advocate and yell and scream and kick and throw. And so how do you support more productive conversations in the day-to-day work? And I think that's what we're trying to do as well. It's like, how do we support frontline members to be able to deliver information? A3s are thought of as a beautiful way to tell the ugly story, right? Instead of just complaining and advocating. So I think it's a two-way road.
Thank you. Any other questions, Matt?
None yet coming in. But even though I'm not part of the panel, I will add to this because you made a great point in your last presentation, Lex, where the A3 is just a wonderful tool for people who aren't comfortable speaking up in groups, who may be a bit shy, because it's a chance for you to put your complete thought on a single piece of paper, and you're not in presenter mode. You can take a complete thought and bring it to somebody and use that as a communication device. Versus speaking up in front of a group. And so for people who struggle with that, it's a wonderful device.
I agree.
All right, we have a couple of questions now coming in. Oh, now they're really coming in. Okay. Can A3 be applied to an organization without calling it an A3 process?
Eliza, you want to speak to that?
Sure. So Lex has discovered that yes, in fact, you can do that. I think that it really helps when you have some, the depth of knowledge that someone like Lex and my fellow panelists have, because you're really understanding what is it that you're trying to have, what is that dialogue behind it. So the idea that you would create, be very clear with your intention and purpose statement, really make sure that you're factual about having, what's happening, everyone's aligned on those things, and then you move into, a plan or experiments that you want to run, and then how you're going to measure it. You don't need the actual A3 piece of paper to do that exercise. You can take people and lead people through that conversation as long as you have those foundational pieces. And I will say this one, we have learned this one the hard way, and you're visualizing it for everyone. I think that is a key piece, is that visualization for everyone, where everyone can see their thoughts reflected, can see what input was contributed, is a real cultural game changer for people, because now it starts to kind of come to life. I think Lex has really enjoyed the last 2 years of learning how to do A3 without A3. So.
Yeah. Very true. Very true.
Lex, if I may I just add to that as
Please.
well? So absolutely, I agree. Like the visible aspect of an A3 is so critical. And then talking or having dialogue around the aspects of an A3 without having to call it an A3 are important, particularly when I think of coming from the diversity, equity, inclusion lens. We think of people who are neurodivergent. We think of people who are living with a disability. Perhaps they're blind. And so yes, the visible aspect of an A3 is fantastic. Being able to have dialogue is also really important, but having these different tools and conversations, dialogue around the current state of a problem, the future state of a problem, the problem solving of a problem, and really trying to incorporate, again, those historically marginalized voices and perspectives is really critical. But that's what I love about, you don't necessarily have to have that physical A3. You can have the dialogue and the conversation, and be able to also navigate in that manner, if that makes sense.
Totally. And then I think one thing that I would add is one of the hardest things to develop in an organization is that feeling and that rhythm once you get the dopamine hit that Will spoke about, right, of letting it be a living, breathing document, and it starts to shape shift, whether or not you have the physical A3 itself or the electronic A3 that I use. It's like it starts to have a movement and a life all of its own. And I think, it takes a while for teams and organizations to, move beyond, oh, I created my version 1, I'm done. And I socialized it, I'm done. It takes a long time for people to get that it doesn't have to necessarily be laborious to get to a version 3 or version 5. It can actually be like playing an instrument, and you get to a point where you want to update it. And it's the structure that supports you, the scaffolding versus a task to do. I think we have time probably for 1 or 2 questions, Matt. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, no, I think we have a bunch of questions actually. Won't be able to get to all of them, but maybe one more here. This is a common problem. So this person asked, they've been working on a lean program for about 5 years, but A3 is still seen as a retrospective tool that only needs to be submitted to satisfy a request from kind of corporate. What are some ways you've been able to sell A3 thinking as a tool that can be useful throughout the problem-solving process and not just as extra paperwork that corporate is asking for? And I'm very sorry, but I do need to duck out to get to the next session, so I'll leave you all here. Thank you.
Lex, may I take a stab at that?
Please.
So we're not even in the year 5 of trying to adopt the A3 into our thinking, but one of the things, and to what Nadia and I spoke about earlier, about making it visual, and I think especially if you're still working in a hybrid or in a remote environment, which may be more challenging if you're not, but is like literally on a call like this, as people are talking, you bring something up and you start typing, and it suddenly becomes living, breathing, instead of it being something you do after the fact. And that really has been the game changer for us. And then I would say the other pieces we have done is we have built in doing it collaboratively together into some of our quarterly planning that was already scheduled. So it's not an additional add to. And it's forced teams who have no idea of the A3, are not used to dealing with A3, don't think about it normally, to at least get that first version on that first draft. And then we might send somebody who's maybe a little more experienced to help them with, prompt them for the second or third draft, et cetera. But that first draft is hard. So doing that in collaborative online engaged moments has been a real game changer.
Will?
This is a quick example. I'm coaching a pediatrician who's a KPO fellow with us, Learning Lean. She's written an A3 on how to improve access to clinic. She had said, can I bring this into my huddle? And I went to huddle today, and humble for me, learning from me was there. I saw on their wall, Elsa and Anna from Frozen 2, telling everybody how to improve their influenza vaccination rates. Right? They made it their own. The problem, what's the problem? Why now? Where are we at today? What are our targets? All presented with the Disney theme. And I just to say, like, that humility and respect, let people own it, use the skills that they have, leverage the strengths they have, and be willing as an organization to be a little more flexible, but principled, I think is one way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all. And Margie, last words. No? Any final comments from folks as we close? Otherwise, I'll just say thank you to everybody, and please find each other on LinkedIn. Let's all stay connected. I can't say enough, high praise for the leaders that are on this panel and the good work they do across industries. So please follow these folks. Let's all stay connected here. Take care, and thank you for the good work you do. I'm sure you are all doing wonderful work as well. Take care.
And thanks to Lex as well.
Yep,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks, Lex. Thank you.